As the year comes to a close, I'd like to bring your attention to two special episodes from this past year. Last week, we did my favorite episode, so make sure you check that out if you missed it. This week is going to be the most popular episode of the year. So you may have noticed that there was a bit of a trend in productivity. I took a deep dive into ADHD and found a number of experts who had been interviewed on the ADHD podcast Attitude, one of my favorite podcasts that's not my own, about how to avoid distraction, get things done, and be productive. So this episode was from there. Tracy McCubbin really must have resonated with you when she talked about how to declutter. Enjoy. Let's declutter. You're listening to Succeed in Medicine, the show for practicing physicians who want to master the parts of their career and life that med school never prepared us for. From interpersonal skills to career navigation to the essential information every physician needs. I'm Dr. Bradley Block, and in every episode, we bring you brass tacks advice and immediately applicable insights from world-class experts, so you can feel prepared wherever your MD takes you and build a life in medicine that's sustainable, rewarding, and actually worth all those years of sacrifice. You've spent years making careful decisions with lasting impact. When it comes to investing, the same principle applies. Lightstone Direct gives you access to institutional quality real estate investments with decades of proven experience behind them. Invest directly, no middlemen, and a $12 billion plus asset under management real estate firm in your corner. Remember, all investments involve risk. Please visit lightstonedirect.com for a full list of disclosures. Tracy McCubbin, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Bradley. I'm very excited to talk to you and all those doctors out there.
So let's start with the basics, right? Why do we keep so much of our stuff? Why are we so afraid to just throw stuff away?
So I think it's a combination of things. I think that if you go back in time, we are hunters and gatherers, right? That we're biologically designed to save things and to get us through the cold winters and to pick the fruit and dry the jerky. And so that gene or that genetic trait has carried through to modern life. And then all of a sudden, cheap consumer goods and things are easier to get. You don't have to go and pick a tomato and dry it and then make ketchup. Now you can just buy 12 different kinds of ketchup. So I think that we haven't quite caught up with the abundance that's available to us. So there's that. And then I like to say that humans are meaning-making machines, right? All of our stuff comes to us with no meaning. It's just a pencil or it's an earring. But because we have to imbue it with meaning, then all of a sudden it becomes sentimental to us, right? So we create all these stories around why we need to keep it, from I paid a lot of money for it, I can't possibly get rid of it, I might need it someday, my grandma gave it to me and she's passed now, and if I get rid of it, I'll never remember her. So we've come up with all these complicated stories about why we need to keep things, and then we get stuck in that, and we're filling our house with a lot of clutter. And this country's in a clutter crisis. Outside storage units are something like a $10 billion a year business. Only 25% of Americans can park their cars inside their garages. Everyone else that owns a home or has a home uses it for storage. We have too much stuff.
Oh, yeah. A lot of the physicians that invest in real estate, all the physicians love to invest in real estate. So if anyone out there has an online presence and they're a physician, they probably own at least a little bit of real estate. And a big place for them to invest is storage. Storage. To your point, why is it such a hot place to invest your money? Because it's only expanding, because we're only keeping more of our crap. Because that, just to paraphrase, I think stuff imbues it with too much value. It's mostly crap.
Look, I'll tell you, Bradley, I've been doing this for 18 years. I have a very successful company. We have cleaned out hundreds and hundreds of storage units. We have never found anything in a storage unit that was worth more than what someone paid to store it. Ever. If you're paying $140, $250 a month.
My kids just forced me to watch the Minecraft movie. And in the Minecraft movie, there was some magical thing stored in a storage unit. We are never finding that magical thing. You're never going to find this baseball card worth so much money. It's just, yes, it's going to be someone else's old stuff. Yeah. Before you
Exactly.
consider putting your own stuff in there, just think about what are you really saving it for? And is it reasonably replaceable? It's like my wire collection, right? From when I used to have to hook up my tape deck to my CD player, to my receiver, to my speakers. And I kept all these wires and speaker wire and everything is wireless now. And if it's not wired, then I can buy a cable online for $2 and it'll be at my house the next day. So yes.
Exactly. And I always say to people, if you're storing your stuff off site, if you have to get in your car and drive 12 minutes, 20 minutes, find the key, remember the passcode to go visit your stuff. Now I have a moving company out in Connecticut, big, they own 30,000 square feet of storage. And the owner of the company says half of it is stuff that people have just stopped paying the bill for. And it's just sitting out there. If you are storing stuff, you're never going to go visit it and you don't need it. You will not use it again.
But what about at work? Because I have a tendency to hoard printed papers. Now, even though we are online, so I could pretty easily find this stuff, I still end up like it's slowly this pile of stuff that I might need at some point, but I know I never will. Just slowly accumulates until my area looks like a mess. Why am I doing that? Because it's not like I'm saying this stuff has value. I'm saying I might need it later, but I never do. And if I did, I could probably print it out again. So what's my mental block here? Let's talk about me for a little bit.
I think this is interesting that you bring this up because I actually see this a lot with doctors. Doctors and lawyers are like paper people and they're information seekers. And they also overestimate the amount of time available in a day. So they're going to print something out and they're going to read it. And this is the latest study on that. I've got to get up on this.
Read my mind.
And if you add to it, especially the older doctors who before there were, when you had patients' records and they weren't digitized and you had to keep it. And then younger doctors have trained under those doctors and they're trained to keep the paper. And there's just this idea that somehow that information is going to disappear if you don't print that piece of paper out. So I'm always talking about, is there a way that you can make a folder on your bookmarks to articles you want to go back and read? It's just doctors are so worried they're going to lose information because at the end of the day, that access to that information is what makes them good at their jobs and helps save lives. So I get it, but it's really been hard for doctors to step into that this information will still be available to me because, and it's a little bit about what you're saying about cords and cables, right? That I talk about this all the time, that my grandmother, who I was very close to, my whole life had the same typewriter. She used this IBM Selectric. That's what she used. She read her letters on it. She did all this stuff on it. I don't know. I think at this point, I've probably had 15 computers, right? Technology is moving at such breakneck speed that we haven't caught up with it, right? That we're just still don't trust that I'm not going to need that cord or I can find that article again, or we haven't rewired our brain. How do I keep that information accessible to me without printing it out? And doctors are funny. They like their slip. They like their paper. Makes them feel safe. It's like their emotional support blanket.
And then realistically, by the time you get around to reading that paper, it's probably not going to be relevant anymore. And there's going to be a more recent paper that then contradicts that paper. Come on, people, let's be real and save it for, unless you're reading it that night, unless you're reading it immediately. Oh, you know what, I'm getting on the train. I'll read it now. Don't bother.
Exactly. So I had a client who was a labor and delivery nurse, and we did a lot of work, was at a big hospital in LA and was during the 80s and did a lot of research about infant mortality and mother mortality and went to abroad to help other countries, like all this stuff. And so she had file cabinets in her garage full of all of her research material. And she admittedly was like, this is completely out of date, but I put so much, I just throw it away that I did all this work. Like it just goes away. And when the conversation that we had is, but the work that you did, those changes that you enacted that are now saving babies' lives, those are still in place.
Yeah.
So the research behind it, it's still there.
And there's a line for it on your CV, right? That's where it goes. It goes on your CV, not in a file cabinet.
Exactly.
So if you're not going to use it immediately, get rid of it. That's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And a lot sort of our to-do list is magical thinking, right? That I'm going to read all this stuff and this is an interesting article. For me, I'm a cook. I like to cook. And the amount of recipes I print out that I'm going to someday make that I don't make. And instead I was like, just pay the $4.99 for the New York Times cooking app and you're fine. So it's really understanding that some of it is the information will be findable again. Is the information still relevant? Things change so fast. And also, are you really going to read it? And by the way, I think especially for professional people, doctors, lawyers, I think the worry is I'm not going to be good at my job if I'm not up on everything. And of course you have to be in continuing education, but also like, how much are you going to read? If you haven't read those articles in a month, you're not going to read them.
Here's something funny. In my office, we have something called the doc pit, which is just one big like U-shaped desk where all the doctors sit. So we don't each have our individual offices. We have our exam rooms where we see our patients. And then we have an office where we can go either between patients or at lunch or in the morning and the end of the day to do our notes. And there are bookshelves in there. And those bookshelves are filled with textbooks that are largely either out of date or subjects like cell biology that we haven't studied in 20, 30 or more years. One of those textbooks, or maybe a few of them, are even from college that I finished in 2001. What are they doing there? Here's what they're not doing. They're not taking up space that would be used for something else. They're bookshelves. We don't have any other books.
Right.
Those are our books. So they're there more ornamentally than anything else, but they're really not being used. So that's fine in that situation because that space is going to be occupied. But I just really think it's funny.
And I think it's that situation too, where yes, of course you want to project an image of I'm a doctor and I'm well read and I've studied all this stuff. But also if you need to look up something on cell biology, you're going to go to the internet. You're not going to pull down that textbook, right?
No, never. And the patients don't make their way in there. The only people in there are me and my partners. So it's not even that it's ornamental. It's just that we don't want to throw it away and we've got nothing else to do with it. So there it goes.
But I will say this, Bradley, about those books that let's say you were like, these are all clutter and they're out of date and let's throw them away. The thing is, if you have empty shelves, people are going to put crap up there. They're going to see an empty space and they're going to put a funny Marvel figurine or somebody has a bobblehead or somebody's going to go to a Mets game and they think that's fine. They're just going to so you might as well leave the books up there so you don't really end up with a bunch of crap.
Fair enough. Okay. So clearly you have a lot of physicians as clients. And so are there any other common threads that you see among physicians and our clutter, either at work or at home?
Let's see. I think physicians have a lot of wishful thinking about their time and what they're actually going to get done. And they're truth seekers, they're information seekers. So it all makes sense. I do think that I have seen probably a lot of maybe, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but probably what I would call maybe some undiagnosed ADHD, how people process information. One of the things I talk a lot about with my clients is that how you process information is how you should organize for yourself. So for me, I see the world chronologically and alphabetically. It's how my brain lands on things. A, B, C, that. Other people see it as big buckets of categories. And I think that when people start to dive into organizing, you have to accept how you categorize the world. Because if I come into your house and I put a system based on how I see the world, it may not work for you. And I think that's where people get really stuck. And I think sometimes for physicians that they're like, I need to do it this way, or my wife wants it done, or my husband wants it done this way. But you really have to take into like, how do you categorize the world? And this is something else I like to talk about is that I see your home and your office as a tool. Your home is where you rest, where you replenish, where you refuel, where you spend time with your family. Your office is where you get work done. So everything in your house and in your office should be to those goals. So if your stuff is getting in your way, that if you can't find your notepad or what you're looking for, your prescription pad to write because you've got too much stuff on your desk, it's not working. But if you can, let books, for example, they're not in anybody's way. Nobody needs to put anything on their shelves. Let's leave them up there. So it's really understanding, how do you process information? And most importantly, how will you know where to go to find the thing that you need? I call it the great cosmic joke. I just got married about 2.5 years ago to a lovely man. He's amazing and smart and great. He's so mad. So I've had to walk the walk. But one of the things in being together that he's realized is when I'm saying, oh, the keys belong in the bowl by the door because that's the rule and I just made it up. It's no, the keys belong in the bowl by the door. So tomorrow morning, you're not spending 10 minutes. Where are my keys? Where's my wallet? Putting these habits in. And those are great things for people who are potentially a little neurospicy or they're ADHD, that those habits are there to set you up for success. Not about being right or wrong. It's about, I want to find my keys in the morning in my wallet. I don't want to run around like a chicken with my head cut off. So let's put a bowl and that's where they go. And you know how to find them.
Hello there, Dr. Boss. You should consider doing a podcast or starting a YouTube channel. And if you're a doctor that already have a podcast, even a YouTube channel, you want to up level, well, we have just the thing for you. I'm Dr. Ann Trump.
I'm Dr. Mike Lorraine.
We're talking about Dr. Podcast, drpodcast.com. Mike and I are having an actual live event in Orlando, Florida. As a doctor, you need to start making money from your podcast or YouTube channel. We have a stellar lineup of speakers, and for me, it's really more collaborative. It's going to happen in January 15th of 2026, but it's going to be lasting for 4 days. You have really 2 events. So your ticket not only cover the Dr. Podfest event, but it's also covering the whole 4-day event of Podfest Expo, where you learn everything about podcasting and being YouTube and even marketing. You never know what is going to lead you once you get in front of a microphone, doctors, because all sorts of doors will open for you. Take a leap of faith and do something different. And you never know where that is going to lead you. Bring the kids, bring yourself, start something new for January.
So you've just been talking about organize, right? Making sure that everything has its purpose in terms of where you put it so you can find it, so you know it's there, right? That's organizing. But the name of your company is Declutterfly, and we've been talking about like how not to accumulate so much stuff that would then require decluttering. So I'd like you to talk a little about something I've heard you talk about before, which is how decluttering and organizing are not the same thing and should absolutely not happen at the same time.
That's great. And I'm going to throw something else in there because this comes up too, is cleaning. So there's decluttering, there's organizing, and there's cleaning. And they are 3 very separate tasks. And I think where people really get roadblocked is when they try and do them all at once, because you need different pathways to do them. Like decluttering, you're asking yourself, do I need this? Do I like it? Will I use it? Organizing, you're asking yourself, where does this live? Where can I find it again? And cleaning is like scrubbing down, getting rid of the dust and the dirt. So I always say that you start with decluttering, right? So you start your decluttering process, you get rid of the things you don't want, need, or use, and then you organize, because it also doesn't make sense if you think about it. Doesn't make sense to organize before you declutter, because you're going to be creating systems with things that you might be getting rid of. So it's the decluttering process first, then organizing, and then cleaning. So there are 3 separate tasks. And I think when people separate it out that way, it makes it a lot easier. With me that you have children, I think you have 3 of them. And kids' rooms are where hope goes to die. The amount of like rocks and paper and feathers and the things that they found, right? So if you're trying to organize that and you haven't decluttered it, you're going to be organizing homework that
Trash.
needs to keep
Yeah.
trash. Literal children.
Art projects that we're never going to look at again. Yeah.
Homework that, look, the purpose of a spelling test is not to save it forever. It's to learn how to spell, right? It's very, if you think about it in that terms, that you're going to go in, every parent goes in and does the kids' room. You take a trash bag in there and you just throw all that stuff away, and then you can organize. So when people separate those out, it just makes the process so much easier.
So I want to make this a little personal, right? We've already talked about me and my messy desk at work once, but something in my house, my wife keeps bugging me to get rid of some of my old t-shirts, right? How do I get her to leave me alone? Because I don't want to get rid of my old t-shirts. And I know this is a common problem among men, right? Like those t-shirts are from college and they still fit and they're comfortable. And yes, I might wear them twice a year or maybe once every 5 years, but we're not running out of space in the closet. What's rebuttal to this?
So this is where I have my honorary marriage counseling degree. You hit on the most important thing. If your t-shirts were so explosive and so expansive that she didn't have room to hang her stuff in the closet, or you were bursting out and you were taking over other closets, then we'd talk about it. But if it room for it, if you have a place to store it and it's not in her way, then maybe I always talk about this with couples or people who are sharing a household. What's the common goal? What are we creating with our house, right? We want the dining room to be in the breakfast table to be clutter-free so that our can have dinner together and breakfast in the morning, because that's when we check in and we create community. That makes sense. But if my t-shirts are in my closet and you have plenty of room for your clothes, that's a really fair thing. Now, I will say, if you don't wear them, but you're not ready to let go, I have a long history of taking clients' old t-shirts and turning them into quilts, which is very cute.
Actually, that's a good idea because that would work for my kids. They would definitely want to wear that. That's a great idea. To her point, the drawer is getting tight. So it's hard to squeeze everything in there. So maybe I need to get rid of a few. How do we manage kids' toys? Because they seem to just end up everywhere. And then also the fact that it's like the inverse law of toys. The more toys you have, the less you play with them.
Kids' toys are where I really see the clutter crisis, as I call it. And I think that we have to step backwards and we have to look at a couple things. First of all, we have to look at childhood development, that having the old joke is you give a kid a toy and they end up playing with the box.
Yeah.
We've all seen that. But that's actually great because that's developing their imagination. So the more toys that kids have, the less that they're going to be exploring in their minds and they're going to create games. If you just keep buying, they shut down and it loses value. They can't think for themselves. They can't make a rocket ship out of a cardboard box. So I think that parents have to understand that buying all those toys is actually not great for their development. Yeah. And also parents have to and grandparents have to take the accountability. You're the one buying the toys. Yeah. Those kids aren't, unless they get a hold of your phone and can order on Amazon, you're doing it. A lot of it comes out of guilt, right? Oh, I feel bad. I'm working all the time. Let me get them this. It's also kids are wily and they're going to convince you. Where do you want your kids to be spending their time? And how do you want them to be fostering their imagination? I have more and more parents that are taking toys and binning them up and taking a bunch away. And then once a month, rotating them back in, because then it's new and it's something great to see. But it's not great for our kids to have all these toys. They're not being exploratory. I have no kids myself, so I like to be an armchair expert on this. But I have nieces and nephews, and they got one of those play kitchens when they were pretty little. And it was amazing. It was a really nice one. It was wood. It was really amazing to watch them. They're 10 now. They probably got it when they were 3 or 4. But first, they were doing parallel play and cooking by themselves. And then as they got older, they started playing restaurant. And then as they got older, they started playing sushi bar. And to watch them evolve over this toy and to have it fit where they were developmentally instead of just something new coming all the time. Yeah. So I think parents have to really take ownership for that. Why are you buying all this stuff? What are you trying to make up for? And I think also, this is such a hard conversation, but also having a conversation with grandparents. They're the ones that are buying and they're the ones that are showing up and saying, look, your grandkids love you and they want to see you. Can we come up with something else? You don't have to show up with a toy every time you come. Can you teach them how to fish, how to cook your favorite thing? I knew I was in trouble, and I say this from experience. I'd go see my niece and nephew, and I'd always bring something. And a couple of years ago, I came on a trip. They live an airplane flight away and see them every couple months. And the first thing they did was jump on my suitcase and go, what do you got in there? And I was like, oh, I'm part of the problem. So I went on a couple trips and didn't bring anything. And they were just as happy to see me. So I think it's having that conversation with grandparents. You don't have to bring anything. And can you read them their favorite book or take them to soccer practice? Or all this consumption is keeping us unconnected from each other. And so I think for parents, it's hard to say no because it's going to be a fight or a meltdown, or it's like you're exhausted and you're just like, oh, just give in. I see this a lot with parents and their kids' rooms being organized or put away. And they're like, oh, they won't do it. They won't put anything away. And I'm like, really? Why don't you go like secretly look at them when they're at preschool or when they're at daycare or when they're at school? Because they put everything away there. Those teachers have them regimented. They put everything away there. It's just you get home and you don't want to take that fight on.
Oh, yeah. You get that trash bag out and you threaten to throw some of that stuff away. You see how quickly it gets put away. That's the time to do it. But that will turn into a fight and a meltdown.
Exactly. Yep. But that's a great conversation. Again, this going back to why be organized, right? So that you can find what you need. This is the biggest conversation I have with kids and parents. To the kids, like, put things away and you know where they are. You now have the independence to go and find the thing you want when you want to play with it. That's what you're fostering in kids. You put this away, you know that's where your army guys are, or that's where your Roblox are, or whatever the toy you want. You don't have to go and ask your parents for it. So I think that when parents understand that doing that work, and I know it's hard. And I know at the end of the day, yeah, you can sing the cleanup song and it's still exhausting, right? But that you're helping instill this in your kids and you're helping them gain independence.
That is amazing advice. I love it. And definitely a lot of these things need to become part of my life. It's interesting. One of the things in my house, I can deal with mess. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't really bother me. Yeah, I want to be able to find my stuff, but like I can still get my work done and go about my business. My wife cannot get her stuff done if she's in a mess. She just can't concentrate. But at the same time, sometimes that mess accumulates over time, right? As you mentioned, 3 kids, busy house, that it then becomes so overwhelming that she can't take that first step to managing it. And then she ends up in this kind of like paralysis situation. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's interesting. So first of all, there's this idea, and potentially it goes back to the Bible, this idea that neat is the right way and messy is the wrong way. And there's this conversation now about being able to, we call them care tasks, doing the dishes, laundry, care tasks, that care tasks are morally neutral. You're not a bad person if you're messy. You're not a better person if you're neat, right? That there's all sorts of things going on in the brain. So it's really understanding, like all marriage, right? That where's the ground that works for everybody? Yeah. So for me, if I'm super overwhelmed, last weekend, I was overwhelmed with work stuff and I was just like, the backyard's a mess and this is a mess and the house is falling apart. And my husband had to take a minute and say, I think this is about something else. And I'm like, I don't care. It's just all a mess. And then we kind of worked together and put it back together. And then I've had to learn, I've learned not to go into his office because I just don't go in there because that just saves our marriage. But I've also had to learn, like, where are the things that don't bother me, that I'm okay with? That's fine. I've had to reel it back. And also, I think probably much like your wife, I've learned to catch it as it's getting, before it flips over, like that it gets back to the point of no return. And for you, it's hard when you've got 3 kids, right? And everybody's in school and they're playing sports, but seeing it. And that's why I always say, in addition to cleaning, that's why it's good to have a regular decluttering and organizing practice so that it doesn't get overwhelming or so far gone that we got to take the whole weekend and I'm completely paralyzed. But okay, for me, Sundays are the day that I put the house back together and start Monday. And so it's really understanding that she's not necessarily right and you're not necessarily wrong, but where do you find the middle ground that works for both of you? And I think that's really important because people who are, into air quotes, messy, we're just learning so much more about the brain. But for so long, you were morally bad. It was a character flaw. And you're like, if your brain processes information,
the same thing about, we say the same thing about people that like look a certain way with regards to like their physical fitness and their weight. The morally superior person is the one who looks more physically fit, which is where a lot of the body shaming comes from, and where there's this concept that there's some morality attached to it, and it's not good and bad.
Yes, it's not good and bad. And again, that's why I'm not a minimalist, and it has to be perfect. It has to look great for Instagram is your house working for you?
Yeah. Does it work for you? Yes. Does it work for you? Not would it work for someone else? Does it work for you? Yes.
And then when there's 2 people or a family, it's got to work for the family, right?
Yeah.
when we moved into our new house, I put Post-its in the kitchen for where everything goes so that they stayed up for about 2 months so my husband could learn. There's still a few Post-its up 2.5 years later where I was like, got to remember where this goes. So let's just leave. And it's fine.
Yeah. Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show. Please check out her books, Making Space Clutter-Free and Making Space for Happiness. And if you're into side gigs, she turned Declutterfly into a franchise. Tracy McCubbin, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means either you fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please write us a 5-star review, take a screenshot, and email it to me so I can send you a quick guide on how to earn patient trust in 20 seconds or less. Email me at brad@physiciansguidetodoctoring.com and feel free to suggest a topic or guest. I take your requests seriously. The views expressed on this episode are those of the interviewer and the interviewee and do not represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting makes it sound like I'm talking directly to you, this is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice, or financial advice, or legal advice, or really any advice. Thanks again for listening to Succeed in Medicine.